That's why I'm here. This is my soapbox. Portland, Oregon, the Northwest.
Let's take you back to 2017 in the United States. A savage assault on a commuter train didn't just rattle the local community. The shockwaves rippled across the entire nation. It was the breaking point for a man whose toxic beliefs and violent past were on a collision course with disaster. Enter Jeremy Joseph Christian, born on the 12th of January, 1982. On paper, his early years seemed standard enough. He grabbed a high school diploma, did a year at community college, and tossed pizzas to pay the bills. But the wheels came off pretty quickly after his school days. By May of 2002, at just 20 years old, Jeremy had already nosedived into the criminal underworld. During a holdup at a convenience store, he masked up and waved a revolver around. He didn't just rob the place, he actually cuffed the owner to a support pole at gunpoint. He bolted, but didn't make it far. Police cornered him a few blocks down, and instead of surrendering, Jeremy drew his weapon. The officer, sensing an immediate lethal threat, fired 3 rounds, only one connected, grazing his right cheek and leaving a permanent, jagged scar. The judge handed him a 90-month stretch in the Oregon corrections system. Inside, he was a nightmare, violent, and a danger to his own well-being. Because of that aggression, he spent the vast majority of his sentence locked away in solitary confinement. When he got out in 2012, he bounced right back in for 6 months on a weapons rap. By 2013, he was in cuffs again. With no permanent address, he just crashed on friends' and family's couches. No wife, no serious girlfriends, no real anchors. He later claimed his status as an ex-convict pushed him to the fringes of society, fueling a descent into radical ideologies. By April 2017, the mask was fully off. On the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, he openly glorified the mass murderer Timothy McVeigh. His digital footprint was a cesspool of neo-Nazi propaganda and anti-Semitic hate. He called himself a white nationalist, though his actual beliefs were a messy contradiction. It was a bizarre cocktail of ideas he fantasized about living with indigenous tribes in Brazil, while flipping support between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. This erratic spiral terrified the few people still talking to him. They suspected mental illness, though he never received an official clinical diagnosis. That April, he showed up to a so-called free speech rally hosted by Patriot Prayer, draped in a Revolutionary War flag and gripping a baseball bat. He demanded attention, throwing up Nazi salutes and hurling racial abuse at the crowd, practically vibrating with hostility. Cameras even captured him screaming, "Die Muslims," a terrifying foreshadowing of the violence brewing underneath the surface. By May 2017, Jeremy's life was defined by isolation and instability. He had hit rock bottom, unhinged, and primed to detonate. The fuse was lit on the 25th of May, 2017, just before 11:30 at night. Jeremy boarded a Max light rail train in Portland and immediately started making a scene. He screamed that the train operator looked like a damn Muslim. Passengers froze as his aggression spiked, and the verbal abuse quickly morphed into threats of stabbing people. He zeroed in on Demetria Hester, an African-American woman just minding her own business on her commute home. Demetria was exhausted after a restaurant shift when Jeremy locked eyes with her and vowed to stab her, following up with a barrage of racist filth. He told her she had no right to be on that train simply because she was black. When she tried to exit, he stalked her onto the platform. He kept shouting slurs, then launched a full plastic sports drink bottle right at her face, striking her eye. Then came the death threat. Demetria didn't back down. She sprayed him with mace to protect herself. Authorities arrived, but shockingly, Jeremy wasn't the one in handcuffs. Instead, officers focused on Demetria, demanding her identification, while the actual aggressor just casually strolled away. She felt like the suspect because she used mace, while the cops completely ignored the context of the racial abuse and physical assault. She bad just survived. It was a fatal error. Law enforcement had just let slip their only opportunity to stop Jeremy's hate campaign before it turned lethal. Just 17 hours later, disaster struck. Walia Muhammad, a 17-year-old born in Somalia, had been in the US since she was 5. She navigated American culture well while staying true to her roots and her faith as a devout Muslim. On May 26, 2017, Walia and her best friend, Destiny, hopped on the Max train, aiming for the local mall. But they got turned around. They didn't realize they were heading the wrong way until they hit downtown Portland. They hopped off to switch to the correct Green Line train. It was an innocent navigation error, but fate had just put them in the crosshairs. Both girls were dressed in skirts, and Walia was wearing her hijab to cover her hair as part of her school outfit. Despite living in the States for over 10 years without incident, that headscarf immediately acted as a beacon for Jeremy Christian. He was sitting just meters away. Less than a day after terrorizing Demetria, he ramped up the crazy behavior all over again. Waving a Bible in the air, he started screaming about Christians, Muslims, and Jews before locking onto the girls and demanding they go back to Saudi Arabia. Terrified, the girls tried to put some distance between themselves and the man as his volume and aggression spiked. A large passenger tried to reassure them, whispering that it would be okay, but Jeremy's rage was escalating too fast for comfort. That's when 3 men stepped in to form a human shield. 23-year-old Taliesin Namkai Meche, 21-year-old Micah Fletcher, and 53-year-old Ricky Best. Jeremy kept bellowing at the teenagers to get out of his country. Micah fired back, telling him to shut his mouth and leave them alone. But the aggressor wasn't listening. Taliesin, sensing this was about to go violently sideways, pulled out his phone to document the encounter. He spun around and slapped the phone right out of Taliesin's grip before he could hit record. Taliesin jumped up to face him immediately. Jeremy matched his energy instantly, stepping right into Taliesin's face and screaming, "Do something!" Micah stood up to back them up, while Ricky moved in behind Taliesin. That's when Jeremy quietly reached into his pocket. He pulled out a 3.75-inch folding knife, hiding it behind his leg, and shoved Taliesin hard. Micah stepped in to push Jeremy back, trying to get him off the train, but in a terrifying split second, Jeremy snapped. He flicked the blade open. Even though the train was stopped at the station with the doors wide open, Jeremy wasn't going anywhere. It was exactly 4:32 p.m. With the train at a standstill, Jeremy suddenly slashed Micah Fletcher across the throat. As Micah stumbled back, clutching his neck, Jeremy turned on the others. He cut both Taliesin and Ricky's throats with 2 quick swings. Micah had collapsed out of sight, but the other 2 were still within reach. As if the initial cuts weren't enough, Jeremy launched a frenzied stabbing attack. The blood spray was so intense, a witness entering the car thought it was rain. The entire rampage lasted just 12 seconds, throwing the whole train into chaos. Passengers watched in horror as the attack unfolded. Taliesin and Ricky were left unconscious and bleeding out on the floor. The only sound cutting through the panic was Micah begging for help. As blood poured from his neck, Walia and Destiny ran for their lives, abandoning their bags, unable to process the violence. They couldn't understand how someone could commit such a horrific act for absolutely no reason at all. Jeremy grabbed his things and the girl's bag, then strolled off the train. On the platform, he waved the bloody knife at bystanders. He yelled, "Does anyone else want some?" Some passengers chased him into the neighborhood while dialing 911. Others stayed on the train, desperate to keep the 3 victims alive. Civilians performed CPR on Taliesin and Ricky and applied pressure to Micah's wounds until paramedics took over. Tragically, they couldn't revive Ricky Best. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Taliesin was rushed to surgery, but his injuries were fatal. He passed away later at the hospital. Micah was the only survivor. The blade had missed his major arteries by mere millimeters. He survived with a long scar stretching from his ear to his collarbone. The Max line was shut down in both directions for several hours. Meanwhile, Jeremy had fled toward the Providence Medical Center. By 4:50 p.m., police had him cordoned off. He refused to drop the knife, pacing back and forth with his hands up and screaming craziness until he finally threw the weapon at a cruiser. Officers swarmed in and took him down. Even while restrained, he spewed hateful threats, hoping his victims would die. He ranted about being a patriot of Vinland, an ancient Viking settlement completely lost in his own delusions even as they hauled him away. They charged him with 2 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 3 misdemeanors. These included intimidation and being a felon in possession of a weapon. On May 30th, 2017. He appeared in court to enter a plea. He pleaded not guilty, but then launched into a bizarre tirade. "Yes, Judge, my name is Greg Shaw. 95439. From the Metropolitan: free speech or die, Portland. This is America. Get out if you don't like it. He continued screaming, Dean Smith, 92464. Death to the enemies of America. Leave if you hate our freedom. Death to Antifa. You call it terrorism, I call it patriotism. The legal proceedings kicked off on June 6, 2017. During the hearings, they added charges for his aggressive assault on Demetria Hester the day before the murders. The process dragged on with hearings in October 2018. The trial was originally set for June 24, 2019, but in February, his lawyers filed a notice that they intended to use a mental health defense. They planned 3 arguments. First, guilty except for insanity, claiming he couldn't form criminal intent. Second, that his mental illness made him only partially responsible for what he did. And third, that he was acting under extreme emotional disturbance. This delayed the trial until January 28, 2020. A psych report showed major impairments, suggesting his behavior was fueled by alcohol, mental decline, and prison trauma. It indicated his actions were exacerbated by these psychological issues. The report listed disorders like hoarding, PTSD, and substance abuse. It noted his mindset was extreme even for radicals. He was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. His defense team also tried to claim he was on the autism spectrum. When trial finally began, prosecutors called 40 witnesses. Micah Fletcher testified, and a detective showed the jury the folding knife used in the attack. They also played cell phone videos and surveillance footage of the stabbings as key evidence. The case against him was damning. Closing arguments wrapped up on February 19, 2020, and after the jury deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days, they returned a verdict of guilty on all charges. The sentencing hearing descended into chaos when he was ejected from the court after launching a tirade at survivor Demetria Hester. He screamed that she was a liar and chilled the room by declaring he should have murdered her. This happened right after she took the stand to confront him. Listen to the audio. You're a waste of air. When you die and go to hell, I hope to see you there. No, you go back to Tennessee. We don't want you here. I should have killed you. Following that outburst, sentencing resumed on June 24, 2020. The defendant took zero accountability, maintaining the delusion that he was only acting in self-defense, displaying absolutely no regret. Consequently, the judge handed down 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. The court added another 51.5 years for the remaining charges. He tried to fight the decision, citing trial errors, but on June 17, 2024, the Oregon Court of Appeals denied his claims and upheld the conviction in full. Note that this trial unfolded during the peak of the Black Lives Matter protests, following the death of George Floyd. In that charged climate, Demetria Hester used the stand to blast the police for their negligence. She testified about the day prior to the train stabbings, stating officers dismissed her when she reported his specific threats against her life. She argued that their failure to act left him free to slaughter 2 innocent men the very next day. She also criticized the judge for failing to control the defendant's behavior when he acted out or harassed people in the room. In one instance, the judge overseeing the case waved off concerns from witnesses who said the killer was winking at them. The judge actually accepted his excuse that he was just winking at his mother, ignoring the intimidation and fear it caused. Despite the tension, victim impact statements proceeded. Destiny voiced her deep gratitude to the 3 men who stepped in to save her. She made it clear that without their sacrifice, the girls likely would have died in his horrific, murderous rampage. The family of Ricky Best memorialized him as a good man, a father of 4, and an Army veteran who had served for 20 years. Taliesin's family honored him as a hero. He was a recent economics graduate from Reed College, working as a consultant. In his final moments, while the killer spewed hate, Taliesin's dying words were, "Tell everyone on this train I love them." To this day, Jeremy Joseph Christian has never shown a single shred